bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci d'être si nombreux si tôt le matin. Aujourd'hui, je vous propose de faire une plongée, un deep dive dans la production des documentaires et de l'audiovisuel en Nouvelle-Zélande et en Australie. Alors, ça vient compléter les sessions que nous avons fait les jours précédents, mais là, pour le coup, on a un panel uniquement composé de spécialistes, de productrices et d'acteurs du marché australien et néo-zélandais. Pour commencer, je propose que, même si tout le monde se connaît, que chaque personne se présente rapidement pour notre nouvelle assistance et qui ne connaît pas forcément chacune des personnes. Donc on va commencer par Lisa, à ma gauche, et puis ensuite, chaque personne se présentera.
One job, Liz. Malo lovely soifua malelangi mama. Sorry for the late start. So I'm Lisa Taouma, and I'm in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we run a online network called the Coconut TV. As well as that, we have a production house, and we make documentary and drama, a lot of content for young people because our audience is very young, and a whole raft of content. But our primary focus is our online platform called the Coconut TV. Mauru.
Kia ora. Atamari, everybody. I te tuatahi me mehia ngā mahi, ka nui te mahi ki ngā tāngata inua, ngā tāngata moana, ngā kai whakahaere o tēnei kaupapa a whiwho. Just warm thanks to the people of the islands, to the people of all the islands, and to the organisers of this festival here at whiwho for the kind invitation. My name is Lanita Ririnui. I am the executive director of Ngā Aho Whakaari, Māori In Screen, and our organisation advocates and elevates and celebrates Māori In Screen across digital, television and film. And so as part of our organisation, our aim is to elevate our people to tell our own stories and to support others to support us in sharing the stories that need to be retold and to tell the stories of the next generation that is growing and supporting and uplifting our language and our culture. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora tātou. Tēnei au he uri o rongo whakata me ngā mautire tonga. Tino hariko te ngākau ki te tautoko ngā mihi ko whāriki hia. O ku rangatira ngā toki o te ao pāpāho te moana nui akiwa. Ko tēnei te reo manaki, te reo matahiri ere atu ki a koutou. So my name's Nevak Rogers. I'm Māori on my mum's side, the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, Tongan on my father's side. I'm very pleased to be here. It's my first time in Tahiti and in whiwho, so I want to join with everybody else on the panel to say thank you for the invitation. I'm the Deputy Director of Content at TVNZ, which is the state broadcaster in Aotearoa. I've been there for almost 4 years. I look after mostly the local content, so anything that is produced either in-house or commissioned content, and we've got a team of commissioners 10 commissioners who commission content across TVNZ, but work really closely alongside the whole of the department and oversee the whole of the department around programming, acquisitions and so on, but that's not my specialty. So oftentimes it's important, I think, just to understand, like this lady's acquisitions and programming, she's really good at that. Commissioning, stink at that, but I will help in whatever way I can to answer any questions. Kia ora.
Oh. Good morning, sorry, bit of a delay. My name's Anusha Duray. I work for National Indigenous Television Australia. We are also a sister channel to SBS Television, plus that also has a whole heap of other stations such as World Movies, World News, Viceland, and did I already say what I do? Yes, you said what I do. And so, yeah, and I'm Executive Manager of Programming and Acquisitions.
Morena. I'll just use yours. Oh, sorry. Morena koutou, ko Kataraina Keria Mahau, ko Ngāti Koroki Kahukura Te Iwi. My name's Kathryn Graham. I'm from Ngāti Koroki Kahukura, which is a tribe near Karapiro in the Waikato in New Zealand, in Aotearoa. I'm the Māori Development Exec at the New Zealand Film Commission, and I work. Sorry, it's very early for me. I'm just a bit dongy this morning. Translate that, Olivier. We at the Film Commission, we have a relatively small budget compared to the other funding agencies in New Zealand. The money comes from government and from the lotteries. My job is to develop Māori talent and across scripted and documentary, and I read a lot of scripts and sit on a lot of panels, and we basically have opened the door for our people to come into the Film Commission, and we have one main fund which supports a majority reo Māori scripted film, and that budget is 2.5 million. And we have various other funds that are aligned with the mainstream funds as well. So our people have two opportunities to receive funding. And I've been there, I'm relatively new in the film industry. I've been there nearly 3 years. And prior to that, I was a commissioning editor across the various networks in New Zealand. And I think I've been to FIFO about 4 or 5, quite like 5 times, yeah, and always love coming here to Tahiti and seeing everyone from the FIFO whānau, and it's lovely to see you all again. Kia ora rā.
I'm Julia Overton, and I'm from Australia. I'm not with a production, with a funding body or commissioning agency at the moment, and I'm on the panel because I've had many years' experience inside and outside the funding bodies. I worked for Screen Australia, the federal funding body, for many years, running documentary, and then before and after that I've been with my own company, Jots Productions, where we mainly make independent films, not so much series, but I can talk about the landscape in Australia if it's needed. And I'm very, very happy to be here. Like Kathryn, I've been here, this is I think my 4th trip, and I feel very much part of the FIFO family. Thank you.
Merci à toutes pour cette riche présentation. Alors, ce que je vous propose, puisqu'on va parler de documentaire, de programme, c'est de démarrer avec des images, parce que sinon ça ne serait pas drôle. Et donc on va avoir quelques petits clips, enfin on va essayer d'avoir quelques petits clips qui représentent rapidement la création des participants à notre panel. Donc, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue au premier stage d'utilisation de YouTube. Donc, comment lit-on une vidéo embeddée dans un email sur YouTube? On a quand même une excuse, hein, c'est que les débits sont très très lents et donc on a eu du mal à récupérer les datas. C'est essentiellement lié à ça. Alors on commence par la vidéo de Lisa. Lisa est sur clip. Short clip. Ouais, mais justement. Ouais. No, because we don't have the stick on the iMac. No. Ok, ok. Bon, on va démarrer donc avec Lisa. L'idée, c'est véritablement de découvrir toute la richesse et tout le travail qui est fait par nos amis de Nouvelle-Zélande et d'Australie sur les documentaires. Alors, on a vu qu'en introduction, on a beaucoup parlé des documentaires liés aux Maoris, mais je pense qu'il y a plein d'autres choses à investiguer et surtout à découvrir comment sont construites les programmations, avec quel type de programme, quels sont les genres qui sont émergents, qu'est-ce qu'il change aujourd'hui, est-ce qu'il y a de nouvelles thématiques qui sont en train d'arriver. Tout à l'heure, Lisa et hier, nous avons parlé de l'évolution des audiences plus jeunes. Donc, est-ce que les plus jeunes sont aussi intéressés par les programmes Maoris ou est-ce qu'ils veulent voir d'autres choses? Et puis, on regardera ce que vous avez également ou ce que vous faites concernant, par exemple, le climat, l'environnement, la diversité que vous traitez déjà, la parité, etc. Lisa, je te propose de démarrer en expliquant sur Coconut TV quelle est la stratégie et quels sont les programmes les plus importants et les documentaires qui fonctionnent le mieux.
Thank you. Yeah, so we spoke a little bit about it yesterday, but the audience in Aotearoa and all around the Pacific, and probably the same here in Tahiti, like our viewing audience as Indigenous Pacific people is very young. So we are the fastest growing young population in Aotearoa, and the main Palangi population is a much older population. And we are the people who have babies many, many times over. We're a very fertile population, a very young population. So, this is, this dictates everything because everything you make has to be dictated by the audience. So our population, the median age in Aotearoa for Pacific people is 23. So we have, a lot of our content is, and that's the majority, 70% of our Pacific audience is under 20, so it's very, very young. So these are the people that we have to service. So our content's driven by that, which means then we have to employ lots of young people to make it because, we have to reflect who the demography is. So we make a lot of, but having said that, the content that we make isn't, we do a lot of comedy and a lot of stuff that's really engaging, and our comedy's been very popular, globally, because also the amazing thing about establishing big engagement as a Pacific online platform is that, to my amazement, when we started the Coconut 10 years ago, there's nothing else. There was nothing else online in the world. There was no hub. There was no village for Pacific content in the world. There was very little being made. There was things being made in Hawaii, really, really little pieces of content being made, in different parts of the Pacific and around the world in the well-resourced, Western countries. Very, very small. And so we were so privileged and lucky to get some small funding when we started to make one big central hub, one big online village to bring all this together. And I think that's why it was really popular because, everything in life is timing. And we managed to create a home, for Pacific people internationally to contribute to service, to create this online conversation and this canvas for. So the content that we make is an answer to this audience, and while it's very young, interestingly, the content that's been very, very popular is actually a lot of the history and a lot of the documentary content. Documentary content's again, because there's nothing else. Like at that time online, there was no other home. So presenting stories of the Pacific in documentary form and factual form, and telling these truths of our community, that it's like lifting the veil on a whole community of storytelling. And the documentary part of the Coconut is very, very popular. Like, more popular. We thought people would like the comedy and all the really youthful kind of thing, but young people really engage with history and documentary, especially the new generation of very woke young people. They're very, very thirsty and hungry for information regionally, and that's why I think there's a really good synergy with regional documentary connection, because there's so many, especially linking things, like this piece of video is a series about the colonial history in the Pacific on different islands. And so one of the really, really popular forms of content making that we do is the anthology form, because it presents stories. I'm really interested in presenting stories that link different Pacific islands, so we can link the conversations of the Moana Nui a Kiwa. So many of our forms of content are told in a pan-Pacific documentary style, but also our drama series, one of our big drama series that we made is also stories, they're supernatural stories that link around the Pacific too. That is a very expensive and time-consuming process of storytelling, and it's very, very hard, but it was one that we really wanted to tell because we know that audiences are really interested and our connections, and also our points of difference around the Pacific. So this piece, if it ever downloads, is an example of that. This is just a short trailer, and it's about the colonial history of Samoa, of Niue, of the Cook Islands, and I think Tonga, and Aotearoa as well. So that is the kaupapa of what we do and why we do it, basically, yeah. Maururu.
Marie.
It's filled with stories often untold.
The last scene there is showing the white man's way.
Niue is better now without him.
Stories at the heart of modern Pacific identity.
The epidemic, it killed about a quarter of our population.
There were also the shootings of non-violent protesters by New Zealand police.
I have no faith that it was an accident. I think it was a plot to kill the leadership of the Māori.
Stretching across the Moana.
Lots of people will tell you that the mafia are involved in the building of this hotel.
Right onto Aotearoa's doorstep.
That's the sad part of the Dawn raids, is it was racial targeting. So why did they turn on the Pacific Islanders?
Its past have moulded the Pacific's present.
Culture is inevitable in a way. Our colonial hangover.
These are our stories.
The attitudes that contributed to that colonialist rule are still.
Merci. Alors, j'ai deux questions, mais qui s'adressent à tous nos participantes, puisque Lisa nous a expliqué que le public était très jeune. Est-ce qu'il y a un impact dans l'écriture des documentaires ou des comédies qui sont proposées aux téléspectateurs, aux consommateurs? Est-ce que le fait qu'ils soient très jeunes donc, influe sur la façon d'écrire? Et puis, lorsque je vois cet extrait, parce que c'est un problème qu'on rencontre beaucoup, en particulier dans les pays européens, c'est l'accès aux archives. On voit que pour raconter l'histoire, il faut des archives. Est-ce que vous avez accès facilement aux archives? Est-ce que ça coûte cher? Parce que par exemple en Europe, les archives coûtent très très cher et c'est difficile de faire des documentaires quand on creuse trop loin parce qu'on ne peut pas payer et donc on abandonne les projets. Lisa, si tu veux commencer et après on fait le tour.
I can answer the archive question for TVNZ. So maybe 4 years ago, well, actually before I came to TVNZ, we commissioned a film, Merita, the Merita film, which I was here a few years ago, Merita Mita's film that her son Heppy did, that Chelsea Winstanley and Cliff Curtis produced. And we were horrified by the amount of money that we had to spend to unlock the archive at TVNZ. We got a discount, but it was still, from memory, it was about $47,000 just to use the archive. And for me, that there was something so wrong with that, given that this was archive of a pioneering Māori woman's content that she had created, that the interviews that she'd done with people, she got those interviews because of her relationship with them, because of the integrity that she brought to those interviews. And we managed to negotiate this discount because also, you know, we wanted to be able to use, show the film worldwide. And so was really fortunate when I came into TVNZ. We had a number of meetings with our CEO. Stephen came in, and the whole of Māori and PI within Aotearoa sort of stood up and said, "This isn't right." When the archive was going to be moved to Geddes to be administered through Geddes. And it was really good to be able to use that as an example to management within TVNZ. And I don't think they'd quite clicked in terms of the taonga that was in there, the responsibility that comes with that, and actually you can't own that. You shouldn't own that. So now, if it is a project that is a Māori project or a Pasifika project, that's given for free. So all of that archive now is not, there's no charge for that archive, provided, because I have to write my name to it, provided you've got all of the consents in place. So for the Fina film, which is out at the moment, the family have to approve the use of that, of that footage. So I see it as it's a real responsibility. It keeps me up at night. The kaitiakitanga, the guardianship of that, but I work, you know, Stephen and I basically manage all of the PI archive, and any requests that come through, I defer to him.
At the time, it was our own guarantee. Sorry. It was our own guarantee. We told our people, we will never exploit your pictures. So it was a personal. It's a table. Okay. Sorry, Māori people. So we gave our personal guarantee that we would never exploit these pictures, and then, to our horror, we had Geddes get in between the archive, and then try to exploit it commercially. So we were paying for our own material. And that enraged us, and it was really Ngā Aho Whakaari which really led the battle first. So thanks to Ngā Aho Whakaari, and then there was a revolution at TVNZ. You know, they appointed Māori in positions of power so that they could bring this cultural lens to a very commercial. I mean, TVNZ is very commercial, so. Kathy, you know all about that. So it was a personal guarantee, and thank you for that. But we still have to pay a little bit, but nothing like 43,000. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In Australia. We're so fortunate that that was able to happen, and that you led that. Because like for any producer, for us, for example, and for anything that we require to put on our platform, so we've been making a TV program for TVNZ for 13 years, and if we wanted to access the footage we shot ourselves with our own people, we would have to pay a big fee for our own footage to come back to us to be able to use, you know, so we're so grateful. We're very lucky, you know, that this has happened, and so because we know the struggle everywhere internationally with access, with archive costs. It's so
and it's right to use the word taonga, which means treasure. So that's how we view, because it's about our community responsibility, as Stephen said, and connection and responsibility to community. So we're very lucky that you guys made, thank you for making those pathways, because it was very expensive.
I was just going to say that if you need any help in Australia, there's an organisation called the National Film and Sound Archive, and they have one dedicated person working there, a filmmaker called Gillian Moody, and if you have any questions, just go straight to her. She will be your pathway. She's fantastic. And because she's been a filmmaker herself, she understands the vicissitudes under which we all work. Okay.
Yeah. Gillian's fantastic and will look after you very well, and our nickname in the industry for her is Mama Jill. Mama Jill got you sorted. But she's not long been in that role.
No, but she never takes long to settle.
You're gonna need a bigger chainsaw to cut me down.
Like, who do you think you are?
You're gonna need another horse to drown.
It was our life.
Need to see a little bit of love.
Really healing thing.
Cause I've got rules.
What have you got to lose? You're just human, and you're not alone.
It's like crack for the brain.
Mummy, please help me.
It was really terrifying.
Greed has no upper limit.
No Māoris allowed.
Swipe with caution.
Consent can be withdrawn at any time.
Documentary New Zealand, starting Tuesday, September 20th on 1 and TVNZ+.
Merci. Lanita, je suppose que pour... Ok, c'est bon. Lanita, pour Māori In Screen, vous êtes confronté au même type de problématique?
Kia ora tātou. I guess, you know, watching that clip that came from Nevak in TVNZ of particularly No Māori Allowed, which is here as well, just a little bit of background from me. I'm a director and a producer, and then I was a commissioner at Whakaata Māori Television before I became the executive director of Ngā Aho Whakaari. So I've worked with Lisa at the CocoNet, and then with these guys in varying layers of contribution to storytelling, from the practical to the political. And so where I sit now in terms of the political, and then we talk about the stories in that particular clip, stories like No Māori Allowed, stories like Chatham Islanders that is here now. Some of those, you know, those are the stories of the now, but actually they're quite old. They're not new. Lisa spoke about the younger generations and the new audiences. The new audiences are unforgiving, and you know, in Aotearoa, our next generation of people, young people, we're very lucky that our rangatahi Māori have grown up with the language and the culture. So even as short as 5 years ago, some content that has been made is offensive for them. In their perspectives and in their quite blessed and in the lucky situation that our next generation is in being raised with the language and the culture. They're very perceptive, they're stronger in their identity, and so they are so much more unforgiving in the content that has been made, to the point where, and I would say this may be a worldwide trend, why they won't watch the long form television type programming. The identity is massive. The search for identity, they'll watch older content just to see where that status was at. If they resonate with it, okay. if there are things in there, and we have to remember stories are told in place and time, but they are unforgiving because they didn't have to go through a lot of the lived experience of our generation and older. When Lisa talks about the fact that they want to know history, it's because in New Zealand we did not get our history in schools. And our children who are brought up in total immersion, te reo Māori, their history taught in those education systems are Māori. Captain Cook is not a person for them. Tupaia, yes. Tupaia, from here in Tahiti, he will be a tupuna as part of the knowledge that they are taught in their school system. So their perspective on that says a lot. I'm not sure how it's taught here in Tahiti, the history, but it says a lot in the way that they see the world, and that is what we're talking about, and particularly now for Ngā Aho Whakaari and the navigation forward, the tiro ki tua is what we say, to look ahead. And it's been lovely to hear a lot of the things here at FIFO after 20 years to talk about where to go. And so actually, when Lisa says the kids are interested in the history, it's because it's untouched per se. It hasn't been colonised, it hasn't been filtered or washed to a point. So they're really, really interested in what was prior, because if we look at climate change, if we look at all the social inequities, the answers are not in the last 100 years for sure. It's pre. And they really identify that. And I think we all identify with some solutions that are before us. And when it comes to storytelling, po te whakapapa te whakautu is what we say at Ngā Aho Whakaari. And translated, that means the answers are in the ancestry. So when, as commissioners and storytellers, when people talk about story sovereignty and the right to tell a story, traditionally, if you come onto a marae in Aotearoa, we expect you to tell us who you are, but we also are watching you in physical form and all your ancestors coming through too. We welcome the lot. If you come through without the rest, then your ability to share is very limited. So you're essentially a visitor, and that's lovely. But if you want to come and tell the stories, you've got to bring more than just I'm a filmmaker. And so the thing with a lot of our stories is we've had a lot of that, I'm a filmmaker, and that's cool. But your perspective is always going to be limited because your tupuna can't speak to our tupuna, they don't know the language. And that's the other area of connection that we talk about indigenously around. Even with our sister from Australia, there is an old school connection. So we all sit here, and we all have a panel of ancestors behind us as we sit here and share our stories. And I think that's a real big learning lesson for the industry. When they want to tell Indigenous stories, you can, collaboratively. But unless you have the mana of somebody connected to that story that can guide you, you will be fraught with very many problems. And your project will never be giving what it should. It's a learning thing. It is very much a learning thing because the industry is set in a certain framework, and we all understand that. So I think, you know, the collaboration of story and how we mix skill and crafts with the mana of who says who, what and how is the conversation moving forward. But at the end of the day, it's about the respect. It's about the respect for people. And there's another phrase that we use, which is tautoko, not tāhai. Tautoko is support, tāhai is steal. So support, don't steal. It's very easy to come together and create amazingness. We all do it. But just have the right mind frame. It's unfortunate as Indigenous people, we've been stolen from and continue to be. So what we start doing now is just saying no to a lot. The value is high and the value is intergenerational. Thank you. Sorry, that's not your question, but I just needed to say that is the vibe.
Anusha, I don't know if you would agree, but you would say that for us, somebody like Sally Riley, who has been instrumental in Australia in fighting and challenging that all the way. She's been so good. Sally Riley was head of Indigenous Affairs at Screen Australia, and then she went to the ABC where she was head of Indigenous. Then she became head of ABC Drama. So she has an amazing reach, and her ability to just cut the bullshit is fantastic. And so she is another person you need to remember.
Absolutely. Sally's unflinching has always shown huge amounts of leadership and bravery. And she's changed the landscape in a very short time. I mean, and there's all the amazing people that came before her too that were able to get us to that point. Uncle Lester Bostock, Erica Glynn, Frida Glynn. You know, we're very lucky in those trailblazers we have. But we also have to recognise, like, lucky enough to know some of those people, and Sal, the toll that takes. You know, it's a huge toll. It's a fight, and in doing that, you have to give up a lot of other things in your life. So, you know, we adore and respect and treat them with reverence, but it's also something we have to definitely give back to, because these people have put their careers, put their family, everything, you know, on the line to make sure this happens for us and for the next generations.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Merci. Alors, quand je vous écoute, j'ai retenu deux termes importants. On a parlé d'enseignement, d'éducation. Quels sont les rapports que vous avez justement avec le système éducatif? Est-ce qu'il y a des ponts avec l'école en Nouvelle-Zélande et en Australie? Est-ce qu'il y a des programmes justement autour de la culture, autour de la découverte justement de l'histoire des Maoris, des autochtones, ou est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui est juste en construction? Peut-être Kathryn a une réponse concernant des aides ou des programmes qui seraient plus officiels. Je pose la question parce que évidemment, je ne connais pas la réponse. Kathryn?
At the Film Commission, I guess we're a bit removed from the education system, because we're dealing more with in the professional environment. So one of the ways that we support talent development is we have a program called Tuakana Teina, which is a mentoring program for basically anyone that sorry, pardon my French. So it's a program that supports. We believe that it's a reciprocal program in terms of it's not always the mentor teaching the trainee. It's usually it's a reciprocal relationship, and it's overprescribed too, really. And we also have a system where we support interns in the international productions that come across. And that's been really successful. At the moment, we have a big Hawaiian production in Aotearoa, and we have about 4 placements on that. I guess as far as the schools are concerned, many of the schools have really rigorous media studies programs, and from that they'll then go into either a university course or a professional course, which is, you know, they pay fees, but those are the most kind of that. Yeah, but it's always this is an ongoing issue in terms of training and who pays for the training. And I think as a funder, we have limited funds. All our funds are contestable. So while we support talent development, particularly, our team is only involved in Māori, and we have the other fund we have is called Heara, which is a business development fund which supports Māori and Pacific business production, so producers to learn how to produce, basically, because that's the other capacity building is the other roadblock for our people is to actually become fiscally educated, because film financing, as most of the people in this room will know, is incredibly complicated. And it's in New Zealand we don't 100% fund films, so we might fund half of the film, but the rest of the money has to come from the market. And so you have to have a distributor and you have to have a sales agent, and that's just the way it is. And with documentary, I think when you're in the development stages, that's not a requirement, but once you get into a production phase, you have to have those kind of relationships. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really know too much about the education. Lisa might know more.
Yeah, just in a quick overview. So recently, like as of 2 years ago, our government, our wonderfully progressive government at the moment with Jacinda Ardern's government in New Zealand, now Chris Hipkins. We, for the first time, they've made it part of the education curriculum in New Zealand to learn about Māori and Pacific history. And so that's a long time coming. You know, it's a really big change, and but that has great domino effects with a lot of content making as well. So we've been working with the Ministry of Education and developing some resources for that. Because they use all our resources anyway. My son comes home from school and is like, oh, all your coconut content was taught at school today in my social studies class. And so it's nice to formalise that, you know, and because they've made it legislation now, so there is a bit of a spin-off. But the program that Kath was talking about as well, it's been really great having support from the Film Commission and from other from our funding sources for young people to come through. And so our company, the Tiki Lounge, we are basically a giant training ground. We did it for free because we had to in the early days, because we just needed kids, we just needed new people. And that's been a wonderful process, but it's very, very time consuming and very expensive because you are doubling up roles. If we have interns on every single role, but we're so blessed now. That payoff has been fantastic because now we're able, I think we're one of the very few production houses possibly in in Aotearoa that we have a completely Pacific production staff. All our production staff are Pacific Islanders. We only work with Pacific crew, from the runners to the DOP to we only work with Pacific crew, and we work with Pacific talent, you know. So that 360 has been the result of 14 years of bringing people through. So that's the payoff, and it's a big payoff, you know. And when you can operate like that, that's a privilege and a blessing. And then we work with crews all around the Pacific because we're trying to get stories, you know, as Lanita talked about. We need stories told in the voices of people that we are presenting, you know, on screen, and that's our trust relationship with our communities. And so we've developed working relationships with crews all around the region. So that's the other, in terms of education, you know, that's the other really good thing. We've done training models in Samoa, in the Cook Islands and Tonga, and those people are now actively making fantastic content. Tahiti, we work with local crews in Tahiti who are great. And then you get this amazing talanoa with all the region. Yeah, so there's lots of really good things being done, but in Aotearoa, that's what's happening.
And the thing I'm most proud about as well was with the curriculum coming out of high school, there was a whole lot of us who, you know, were doing haka around learning Māori Tung or Mary Queen of Scots, you know, the Gaza Strip, things that are completely not relevant to us. And the rangatahi of this generation there were, you know, people in the streets protesting, rangatahi, young people just saying this is not good enough. And so it was them that turned around, now the curriculum being aligned. And then there are things like I did a Polynesian Panther. My uncle was one of the founding members of the Polynesian Panthers in Aotearoa. That's been used as a resource. There's a whole curriculum now built around that documentary, which we produced maybe 15 years ago. But I also just wanted to pick up on the other point that Neets was talking about, and I think it's so important we've got about 250 shows on our local slate at the moment that are commissioned. Maybe 30 of those, 40 of those are tamariki for young audiences. But every single piece of content that is commissioned at TVNZ for the last 2.5 years has to have like a cultural warrant of fitness wrapped around it. It has to have a cultural integrity strategy. And it doesn't matter what your story is, whether it's, whether it has Pacific Island or Māori key creatives or not. But what it means is you have to ensure that everything is accurate. You have to make sure that it's culturally appropriate. You have to capacity build. So having, shadowing where you've got, for the documentary strand that we just had there, you had to have a tuakana taina in there so that, these were the top sort of directors, producers, writers. They have to have somebody that they're bringing up alongside them. You have to ensure that people are culturally safe while they're making the productions, that they're not put in positions, as we all have, coming up. And in fact, I've put people in culturally unsafe positions as a producer, but not knowing what you don't know. You make that mistake once after you get slapped around the ears. And so every piece of content has to have that. And that's a state broadcaster, and I've said this publicly, who has been one of the best tools of colonisation in Aotearoa for decades. And that no longer is allowed. So I think we're at this really beautiful position of consciousness in Aotearoa. We've got a long, long, long way to go, but we're on the track.
Yeah, could I add to that I recognise that the government, this progressive government that Lisa talked about, not only has put New Zealand history into the curriculum, but she also did a thing involving your uncle, which was, and our older generation, which was to apologise for the dawn raids. And I can't tell you how strong that was for Pacific people. She, I was there. I mean, I organised the OB, outside broadcast unit. I organised that with Nari, and I said, there's no way Jacinda Ardern is going to sit under a fine mat and beg for forgiveness. Well, I had to eat my words because she did. And it was, it really touched a lot of people. And what I learnt later was that it was her staff, the Prime Minister's staff, that put the fine mat over her. This is like a cultural ritual for forgiveness. And it was overstayers that took it off. And that is really something strong. So anyway, the people who were who had been deported, the problem. There was a problem of people staying too long in New Zealand, and and that's what the dawn raids were. They chassaient les gens. Sorry, they were raiding homes early in the morning, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It was terrifying, and Nevak commissioned a drama series about this. It's from the 70s, from les années 70. So it's a very very, very, it's still sore, but what Jacinda Ardern did 2 years ago was just unbelievable, and it just adds.
That's right. It's part of this massive process of the unravelling of colonial history. Yeah. So that iwhonga, that sent the most powerful message to the country about this massive. It's a state of unravelling our colonial history at the top level, and so this is a movement. It's a huge movement, but it sends a message not just to Aotearoa and our Indigenous communities, but to the region. So people are toppling statues of colonizers in New Zealand, and there's all these are they're. It's the start. And while it's wonderful and it gives us so much hope, the reason these kids are engaged in history, like Lanita said, Because it's the tip of the iceberg. It's only just happened. There's centuries of history, you know, and it's the first time we've had a chance to shine a light on it. So all these stories we're making, it's wonderful they're being told, but we've got a backlog because it's just now starting, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of years worth of history to catch up on. So we're just telling the very start of it, same as the situation in Australia. And we've got an avalanche of stories that need to come through.
Alors justement, on sait que le lieu dans lequel nous sommes aujourd'hui, comme le FIFO, permet à vos documentaires et à vos créations de voyager. Mais est-ce que vous avez, au-delà on va dire du cercle océanien, des offres ou des contacts avec d'autres broadcasters dans le monde pour acheter et distribuer ces documentaires qui retracent l'histoire des populations océaniennes?
Yeah, well, we're buyers, so I think I've bought off almost everyone here, and absolutely that's our interest, because what we find is that the international stories are very successful, and also in terms of, you know, what we were just talking here, the kind of big buzzword, and it's kind of translated from a lot of our languages, is we call this process that we're going through now truth-telling, because the true history was not told, it was told through other people's eyes. So we call this, we're in this moment of truth-telling. And it's really healing, even though a lot of the, you know, the documentaries and stuff are very disturbing for us. It's our people love them because they're all the same. And so, you know, we got told for generations that, oh, it was a mistake, you know, we thought we were doing the best for you. You know, it was, you know, we took the children because it was the best thing, and it was, you know, a misjudgment. It was just an accident. And, you know, and the reality is when you look around, you look at all, majority of Indigenous, you know, peoples, whether it's Canada, whether it's America, it was the same strategies in the same menu. So it wasn't by accident. This was a strategy. You knew what you were doing. And that in itself of us understanding wasn't just us. We weren't just not good enough, or we were bad parents. It's like, no, this was a strategy that was worldwide, and it wasn't us, and we are all valuable. So it's really healing. And they love the stories. Our audience love the international stories. And the other issue is that we're pretty much married into, you know. Most of us have got family, like Tongan family, Maori family, like, you know, so it's really beautiful, and we have to represent, you know, especially content from Aotearoa is huge for us because we actually have more of their people in our country than ours. So there's a bigger audience for it, and they love it. So, yeah, absolutely, we're always buying and looking and programming.
Anusha, je crois qu'on a une petite vidéo, si tu peux nous la commenter.
NITV is the home of Indigenous storytelling.
We represent the oldest living continuous culture on the planet.
And 10 years ago, we joined the SBS network so we could share our stories.
Created by the first inventors, have sustained my ancestors for at least 65,000 years.
They've domesticated a whole
And science working together. What else is possible?
Living Black has the conversations that matter.
Issues of sovereignty, issues of justice.
Join me, Carla Grant, for thoughtful and entertaining discussions that will leave you inspired.
This is my country. Dahlia grew up here in Manjicore like me.
We call each other cousin. Aboriginal way. Every time we have fun, we always get caught.
Hey, put them back in their cages!
There's no better way to understand the people than through their food.
Okay.
The journey to uncover the secrets of Torres Strait Islander cooking.
That's all that love going into it.
Locked up. They've all had negative experiences with police.
We come into this job with the intention to start a healing process between police and our people.
I want them to know that I'm for help.
It's never too late to learn, and so I got some mates in to help me. Bianca.
Thanks for having me.
Shoes.
Oh, wow.
Because Ray's going hiking in North Tasmania.
The greatest stories are where you'd least expect.
It's coming up on Going Places.
No. We are the lovely people in lovely country.
It's a dream come true.
These are people's stories, and these are people's journeys.
That connection you made can last forever.
Bravo. Alors justement, avant de se quitter, j'ai une question, puisqu'on a beaucoup parlé d'histoire et d'éducation. Quelles sont les grandes thématiques qui se développent aujourd'hui dans vos régions? Est-ce que par exemple un sujet qui nous concerne beaucoup en Europe en ce moment au niveau médiatique, c'est le climat? Est-ce que c'est des sujets que vous traitez, ou est-ce que vous êtes vraiment focus encore et toujours sur les sujets autour des populations maoris et des peuples de l'Océanie?
It's definitely something that affects us deeply, and we have family in Tuvalu and Kiribati who are deeply affected, and even in Samoa there's SPREP. So there are more stories to be told, and I know that Lisa has been working on a project about climate change in the Pacific, and it's so bizarre. You're no strangers to the fact that we add the least to climate change, but we suffer the most. Yes, it's a huge thing. And just right now, look what's happening. Have you ever been to a FIFO where it hasn't rained? And this is the first one. And in New Zealand, it's raining all the time. It affects everybody.
Yeah. It's the conversation of this generation, but it's the conversation that's the future, and it's so active. And Lanita talked a bit about how all our younger generations are so politicized now because they've had the education and resources to be. But this is a generation that we look to because they're the ones driving the spotlight on the Pacific. So there's an amazing group in the Pacific called the 360 Pacific Climate Change Warriors. So they represent at COP every year. Brianna, who's a producer for us, she presented at COP last COP in front of all the world leaders and Joe Biden as the voice of the Pacific. So we're working on this big climate change regional documentary. But what the focus of this documentary is, because extraordinarily, there has not been one made in the Pacific. I know there was Antoine's Arc, there's a few stories, but why? You know, this is the most impactful trauma of all our generations, and there's for the future, it's our trauma of the now and it's our trauma of the future. But there's been nothing comprehensive made on it to present to the world. So we're being funded to make a big regional documentary on climate change. It's called The Forgotten Pacific. We're working with lots of different islands on this, but what we want to tell are the stories of how Indigenous communities are coping with climate change from the knowledge and the traditional knowledge from the past, because so many communities don't want to rely on Western intervention. They don't want to rely on Western technology because it's inaccessible and it's governed by, it's politicized. So in the climate emergency, we're in a climate emergency, there's so many beautiful, beautiful ways that communities are reaching to the knowledge holders of the past in order to heal their climate crisis. And so you get, like in the Solomon Islands, you know, there's communities that are looking at planting by fishing, planting by the moon. All those calendars are now coming back, you know, and looking at ways of growing and replanting mangroves and, you know, all our traditional ways of doing things, traditional fishing, you know, without the long lines, without the impact of a lot of Western technology. So that's the way people are looking to the past to heal the future. And those are beautiful stories, you know, so we're working with a lot of communities on the ways that they're doing things, as well as the agencies like SPREP, the Oceanic Waka communities, you know, how people are looking at traditional Waka resurgence to be used more practically in our lives. But there's some really interesting things, proactive things, you know, like our communities they're trying not to be victims to the crisis. We're trying to use all our natural resources and tikanga knowledge in the climate emergency. And so that's a really, really important conversation to present to the world, you know. And the hashtag mantra is, we are not drowning, we are fighting. And so that's what we're putting forward in this documentary, but it's huge.
Merci pour ce témoignage. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle? Parce que nous approchons du terme de la session. Pas de questions, mesdames. Est-ce qu'une d'entre vous veut conclure pour le mot de la fin? Lanita? The last word?
I don't know if I should have the last word because I have a lot of them. But it has been lovely to be here and share. It sounds hard out what we're sharing, but in actual fact, it's an opportunity. All the things, when we talk about the past trauma, it's to even say what it is an opportunity to share for general people and filmmakers outside of ourselves who have to live with this every day, who have to sleep, thinking about how to be better. At the end of the day, I think that the key, particularly in documentary, and the reason why factual programming is something really close to our hearts is because facts have not been told. So our people, even when our rangatahi write to people who've been in this industry for a long time, really trying to tell the stories that don't infuriate us, but share stories of, this is what happened. I got told, oh, you people always make angry things. I go, well, there's a reason. And why shouldn't we? But the opportunity now is to go, yeah, angry. And we're allowed to be. Also, though, we're a rainbow. We're a rainbow of people. You can't just ask the one Māori in the room and they're speaking on behalf of all of them, because it's so not true. We all fight as well. So you have to be very particular about which Māori. And so when people come to us and say, I've got a program, I've got a Māori on my team, we're like, well, who? Another kaupapa for us at Ngā Aho Whakaari, ko te mea nui, ko te tangata. We ask, who is the person? Because each person has a line of ancestry that gives mana to different things. You can't just be the brown face on the team. And even people need to understand that we have our own trauma. Just because we're Māori does not mean that we hold all the things. Does not mean we can karanga you on to places, that we can do all the traditional things, because our people have had that taken from us, and we are all still in learning, and we are all still in intergenerational trauma to bring it back. So there's that pressure that we get from other people that go, oh, Māori, karanga for me, sing for me, do all the things for me, and we just have to go, cool, but no, and don't. And it's hard for us to say no to things that we are meant to know in our own selves. So I think that's another thing for people to recognise in the factual world when they come to us about what they want to share and tell with us. They have to get past that you're a Māori. You're a Samoan, you're Tongan, you have to know deeper. It's like people coming to all of you and going, you work in TV, can you fix my TV? Same. You know, so it's just, it's the real honest and authentic connection from person to person. And what can we do as people just to be very mindful, to be very manaaki, to take care in the connections that we make. And we're not all going to connect well, and that's okay. And just know when to leave that at the door and find your tribe, find your fit. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from today and talking about where we're at as storytellers and in the documentary and factual world, how we can all be mindful. You don't have to be Indigenous. You can be an ally. Like, there are ways to be good allies, but stay your lane. Stay your lane. You'll have a much better experience. Friend me or fight me is what I like to say. Take your pick. Kia ora tātou.
Merci à toutes.
What we've got is a cultural integrity. So each show needs to have a strategy, and it looks at those 4 pillars. So how are you going to make sure everything's accurate, that it's culturally accurate, that everything's pronounced properly? How do you... Right, so that's the first part. How do you make sure it's appropriate? So how is it culturally appropriate in terms of what the story that you're telling and the way in which you're approaching it? How do you make sure you're capacity building? And then how do you make sure that people are culturally safe? And so each show, there's not a one-size-fits-all. So every single strategy is very, very different. And we look at who are the people who you've got attached to each of those stages. There's no point, long gone are the days where you could just have a cultural consultant who you just trot out and they do a little bit of stuff. So we want to see, what is that cultural consultant going to be responsible for? Who in the team who is making the editorial decisions, where's the money going? How it, like, so right across the board, we look, that strategy has to be set out before we'll greenlight a commission. And you know, we've only been doing this for 2.5 years. We've taken lots of learnings. We ask for lots of reports so that we can then learn, and how do we, you know, strengthen that. We're doing lots of training, lots of wānanga, so that we're training other consultants. And then I think the other thing is, I mean, Neets and I were talking about a project on the plane on the way over here. You know, often people will say, so in my tribe, they'll say, oh, Nevak will go and consult with Nevak. And I'm like, I can't even speak for my whānau who I birthed, let alone my entire hapu or my entire iwi. And so it is about also, because we're such a small country, we know who the good guys are. We know if you're going to Ngāi Tahu, which is the South Island tribe, we're filming there at the moment. we had a look at who the people were that they were consulting and what their job descriptions were, and we were like, that's not going to be enough. That person is probably at this entry level. You need to have people at this level or access to people at this level. You need to ensure that you've got them on the ground, that you're paying people who are going to be there for the entirety of the shoot. Are they going to be listened to? Who is the director? Has this director got a good relationship with those people? So we have somebody whose sole job is to oversee all of those cultural strategies at TVNZ. So we employed them 18 months ago, and that's made a massive difference. And we've also just ensured that we have, you know, Pacific Island, Māori, Asian within the commissioning team as well. And that was something that was never, ever... When I joined TVNZ, there was not one single Māori person in the whole of the content department. It wasn't good.
I would also add, so in Australia, we're, you know, in some ways really lucky. Oh, we definitely are. Screen Australia has had a protocols booklet out for working with Indigenous people for over 25 years. With us, with NITV, we have very, you know, because we're funded as a national Indigenous broadcaster, so, you know, 2 out of the 3 creatives have to be Indigenous. You know, there's all of these kind of things in place. But still in that, it doesn't mean it's easy road, and we are continually learning, and it takes continual effort because, you know, like any kind, you know, it's exactly the same. We've put people in locations that have not, and on projects that have not ended up being culturally safe. They are not being treated or used in the right way. You know, it's like anything with government. People will try and get through loopholes. So it takes a lot of effort. Takes a lot of vigilance and just to be staying on top of it and continuing talking to those people. And so how was that for you? Debriefing with producers, debriefing with the attachments, and just continually trying to find best practice. So in no way, shape or form, like, you know, I remember Canada has only just kind of got their protocols, and there was a lot of fear when they brought it in, and we were lucky enough to be brought over to have some of those conversations. And the film industry there was so scared of these Indigenous protocols of like, you can't do this, and this is like going to be a law and stuff. And it was like, we just, you know, I remember Erica saying one day about the protocol, she was just like, it's just the start of the conversation. That's all it is, but we've got to continue and we've got to be vigilant about it. So it's definitely no easy road, but it's really important, and you get the benefits of it because some of the content that has come out has been fantastic, but it's not easy, whether you're the producer, whether you're a commissioner, like on either road, you continually learn.
Shitting themselves going in, but then on the outside of it, coming out the other end, they've gone, that was a most enriched, you know, we had this incredible experience. We would have karakia in the morning, we'd have shared kai, the whanaungatanga, the familyness of the production worked so much better. We're learning lots of things. Half of them are now going off and doing te reo Māori classes. They're hungry, so we do Māori language classes at TVNZ every week. That's been in place for 4 years, and now that's wanting to be extended to other producers and independents. So there's, again, that movement that you talked about. It's great, gaining momentum, and yeah, we're seeing those changes on screen. Well, I think for us it comes back. So we have the tiriti of Waitangi, so that our treaty kind of for us sets the partnership. So that we've got that founding document to fall back on, and that is the things that, you know, we're putting into our legislation and doing all of those. So I feel like, so we call it tangata whenua, so people of the land, and tangata tiriti is everybody else who signed the treaty. So we are in partnership the whole way along. And so on my Tongan side, I'm tangata tiriti. On my Māori side, I'm tangata whenua. You go to Tonga, different story. So it's about finding that partnership. And the manaakitanga, like, that's the other thing is, you know, we're often chiding our Māori side because are angry, having gone through their whole lives, having to do with this stuff, but it's like we've got to be better at manaakitanga, at looking after and bring them along. And if they fall over and if they, and there are some who have just not been up for it, well, their content's not really getting commissioned anymore. So that's how we fix it.
So I think you should understand that the younger generation are much more accepting of this because it's in the curriculum. And the older generation, it's difficult for them. Even, TVNZ News is the most watched news in the country, and they always add Māori words, and they translate it immediately, and there's still resistance, and it's incredible. But the younger generation, they accept it, so they know it's part of them too. So they're not excluded if that's what you were thinking. They just think that's part of the New Zealand identity. It's a Māori country. It's a South Pacific country. It's not part of England, Yeah.
And I think, when Lisa was talking about the whole climate change and because we're doing the same thing and our young people are making these films about it, but our cultures are very different, but also very similar in the fact of we're holistic. So even though this is the film industry, and we've talked about here about, they're very lucky, they've had a change in education, truth-telling for children and in schools, but the re-emergence of language, all of that stuff, our connection, all of us that we share, is a deep connection to country. Country is number one. That's our number one priority, is our number one relationship. That's what we're told. It is our role to care for it. It cares for us. And we truly believe when you speak your language, when you care for that country, it is reciprocated. So the more, whoever you are, you start using our words, using our language, our land loves it, and it will begin a healing that's beyond all of us. And I think that's really exciting. So, I have lots, but even on productions, I'll have, people from overseas or white fellas go, what do I do? How can I be more of an ally? I've had this great, and I was just like, you know what? It's such a, if you want something really simple, you can go and donate or, do whatever. But every morning when you wake up and you're brushing your teeth, if you look in that mirror and you just say, I'm on native land, and I'm telling you, it will do something to your spirit. And we truly believe that. It will do something to the way you deal with Indigenous people. And so it's really holistic. Caring is everything. And the relationship is absolutely two ways. So the more we do and the more we tell the story, we believe the more the land will heal and give back to us, which then leads us to heal. One of the old fellas from home, the elders, he said to me once, because we were sitting there looking at these beautiful mountains and everything, and there was a whole mix of us, but most black fellas, but not from that area. And we were all talking about the country and climate change and healing and how dry it had been and stuff. And he turned around at one point and said, I wonder what the mountains are thinking about us right now too, and that's the kind of relationship it is. It's like, it's very two-way and living and life.